Hey guys, so I'm back in Australia now. I landed in Sydney 2 days ago, I think. So I'm at Redhead Beach now with Bella, little special guest, and I'm going to answer some of those questions that you asked me. Um, I apologize in advance. There are some I've looked at every single one of them, and I've really thought hard on how to answer them because some are pretty like really good questions, but I just some of them I just don't know how to answer. But I'll try my best, and yeah, I'll let me have a look at the first question, then I'll cut back. So the first question was, what's the best meal I had on the whole trip? Technically, I had one really like fine dining, like super nice meal at a Michelin star restaurant. So like hands down, that was the best food I ate. Technically, it was like a sort of traditional like four-course meal, with dessert and with some wine and then coffee afterwards, and it was just, yeah, like exactly what you'd expect from a Michelin star restaurant. Not that I go to them all the time, but yeah, it was just like fine dining, like everything, every bite I ate was incredible. But apart from that, I do remember this one pizza in particular in Agarola, close to Amalfi, and I think the, the context in which I ate it, I was just super hungry and I was really craving just a basic pizza, and so I got a marinara, which was just the tomato sauce, some garlic, and olive oil. And at the time of eating it, I thought it was the best pizza I've ever had, and I kind of agree with that now. Maybe I'd say top three, but in the time of eating it, that was probably the most enjoyable meal I'd had. The next question is, what's the best sunset that I saw and why? And I have a feeling that's probably just like a bit of a sarcastic question, but I actually do have an answer. There was one hostel I stayed at in uh, near Marsala in Sicily, on the west coast of Sicily, and the kitchen in this hostel, like it wasn't really like a hostel, like it didn't feel like a hostel. It was like just someone's like holiday house with heaps of beds, and they had this massive kitchen that looked like something off like a cooking show. And I bought ingredients to make some dinner, and so I was just cooking, like, had a glass of wine. I was just having a really good time, and the sun was setting just in front of the kitchen, and I took some photos. It was just incredible. It was like, it just felt like a movie, like the sun was setting as I was in this big spacious kitchen cooking, some meal. So that's probably my answer for that. Next question is, did I have any memorable unexpected challenges? So I certainly did, but nothing too crazy. Like, I feel like I was very, very lucky the whole trip. Maybe half a dozen times things went a bit sideways, but I got very lucky every single time. For example, when I went on the camping trip, and we were faced with the problem of just not knowing where to sleep, or worst case scenario, we'd just have to pitch our tent in like the forest with just rocks and sticks and leaves on the ground. But then we got super lucky and found this open plain, which if you've seen that video, you'd remember. Um, I think the most, like, I didn't really feel stressed at all in the trip, but the most stressed I did feel was when I got that flat tire. I only got two flats the whole trip. The very first one was fine, like I had plenty of time to fix it. Um, but the second one, I was on a time crunch, time limit. I had to make a bus, and if and I was just struggling getting the tire back on. Like, I took the tube out, fixed the flat, fine, but then getting the tube back on, my tire levers were bending because they were sort of a cheap plastic, and so it was seeming impossible to get the tire back on. And I was kind of in the middle of nowhere, so I couldn't really ask anyone for help. And then I finally got it back on, and if I had to keep riding to get the bus, I wouldn't have made it. But luckily, I got a lift there. So that was probably the hardest challenge I faced. But yeah, honestly, overall, I was super lucky and just didn't really have any big problems. Does time fly when you're having fun? Was a question, and absolutely, 100%, no doubt. The 2 months just felt like 3 weeks. So yeah. The next question is, do I think I have changed in any way since traveling solo? Kind of a disappointing answer, but I don't really think so. Um, maybe other people have noticed differences in me. I'm not too sure, but to the best of my judgment, I kind of just feel like the same person I was before the trip, except just with cool memories and more experience traveling. I think I thought I would maybe end up being a bit more extroverted because I think I'm pretty introverted. And staying at hostels, like socializing for 2 months straight, I thought maybe I would come out changed in that sense. But I don't really think I have changed much or at all. Sorry about that disappointing answer, but yeah, that's what I think. The next question is, what are 3 valuable things that I learned on the trip? So I thought about this one for a while, and I think I can just answer one valuable thing. And I didn't want to just say some cliche answer like, oh, travel as much as you can or see the world or anything. But I did think of one very valuable thing that I think is specific to me and probably a lot of people. But what I've now got a very valuable kind of opinion on is being able to work remotely and from a laptop. Now, obviously, if you are in a line of work that you need to be in person, if you're like a labourer or a tradie or any like a doctor or surgeon or anything like that, obviously you need to be in a certain location. But for me personally, trying to make a career out of music or like a studio business, it is very doable to switch my studio from being, a big studio room to something I can just work on my laptop. And I think for me, that's the most valuable thing I've realized. And that's what I'm going to try and work towards now, is being able just to work remotely on my laptop. And that in turn means more traveling and more flexibility and things like that. So yeah, that's probably the main thing I realized is very valuable, is just being able to work remotely. Next question is, did I try the black pepper and cheese pasta again after the first time in Rome, and how did it compare? So I did. I actually tried it on my second last day, which is also in Rome, because that flavor pasta is kind of local to Rome. So yeah, if you remember one of the first videos, I had a black pepper and cheese pasta in Rome, and it was incredible. Actually, thinking back now, it might be in my top 3 meals that I had. And I did have it the second time towards the end of the trip, and it just didn't compare. It wasn't as good. It was from a different place, like a different restaurant. But yeah, I really did enjoy that first one, and it's a shame that it might have just been a really good restaurant instead of a really good pasta flavor. But I'm still glad I tried it. But yeah, to answer the question, the second one I had didn't compare to the first at all. And I'll try and make it myself. I'd like to see if I can give it a shot, because I love black pepper, and I'll try and get that rich pepper flavor without being too spicy, which I still don't know how that was achieved in the first pasta, but yeah, it's worth a shot. What surprised me the most about this trip? I think going into it, I was expecting to stay mostly in just small villages, and avoid the bigger cities. And although I did that for probably more than most people would, I saw a lot of just small towns and villages with barely any tourists. I actually did really like the bigger cities too. I wouldn't stay in one little village more than one night. You kind of can just do everything in 2 hours. You can walk around, see the whole place. Maybe there's some historic castle or something you can just see in 45 minutes. But the bigger cities like Florence and Palermo and Catania, I only stayed one night in Catania, and Rome as well. I feel I really could just stay there for weeks, and there's just so much to do. So yeah, that probably surprised me the most, is how much I like the bigger cities. And yeah. So next question is, what is an experience that I thought was very overrated, and an experience that I thought was underrated? So, underrated, I don't know, like, this is it's a very highly rated attraction in Italy, is the Amalfi Coast. Like, arguably one of the most popular sort of destinations for tourists, and I didn't go planning to ride the Amalfi Coast, but that was, besides the Wolf's Lair Trail, that was the best ride I did, just along the coast there. I had no idea it was I know it's very popular to ride, in your convertible, like, sports car, and also a lot of motorbikes, like, motorbikes and scooters. But I hadn't really heard anything about cyclists, but it turned out to be just the perfect ride. Like, the inclines, like I keep forgetting the name of it, like the altitudes. Yeah, there's a better word for it. But basically the hills, the ups and downs, weren't too bad at all. And the scenery was just incredible. And the day that I did it, I got perfect weather, ideal temperature, the sun was out. And at this point I felt quite confident riding in moderate traffic. So, with the buses stopping to let the cars around the corner, and, unexpected traffic stops, and I was kind of weaving through cars, I was at the point where I really enjoyed that. Like, I felt like I was confident enough to be safe. But it was also it was kind of like a game. Like, you really had to pay attention, and it was just fun. So that was probably the most underrated experience, or the thing that I liked the most that I didn't expect to like. And overrated, probably, like, I wouldn't say any experience in particular, but just some hostels that I booked that, well, quite literally were overrated. They might have like a 9.6 rating on Hostel World or Booking, and all the comments are like, yeah, this hostel was the best I've stayed at, and there's so much to do, and great location. And I'd get there and there's just no one there, and it's so far from everything. And that didn't happen often. Maybe like 3 or 4 times I was pretty, like, disappointed with the hostel. Like, I had really high expectations. But I guess with that, it's just sort of luck of the draw. It depends on who's there, how many people book that night. So yeah, that would probably be what I'd say is the most overrated thing I experienced. Next question is, what inspired me to do a solo bike trip, and did that inspire me to want to do more solo trips in the future? So when I was planning the trip, I initially I was researching car rentals, and, like, even buying a cheap car and then selling it at the end of the trip. And then that moved on to, like, more of a scooter motorbike thing. And I can't remember exactly why I decided against that idea. I think there was some issues about getting a license, and I can't really remember. But I ended up deciding, and for a bit I was just deciding to do the traditional, like, backpacker thing where you just get the Europass or the Eurorail or whatever it's called, and just get the train everywhere. But then I decided to buy a bike because, well, for one, I think it was a great way to travel. You can see things, just, like, it's very slow pace, and you can really soak in everything. And not to mention, I can just bring it on the train if I needed to, which I did plenty of times. So I wasn't exactly stuck just riding a bike. I could get around to anywhere if I wanted. You just have to pay an extra few euros to get the bike on the train, which is nothing. But the other thing that inspired me to do a bike trip was I sold my car 3 months or a few months prior to this trip, and I was just getting around everywhere by bike. So I had the opportunity to train and prepare, and I wouldn't call myself, like, a cyclist. Like, it's like, I like it, but it's not, like, part of my personality. Like, I'm not like Jacob the cyclist, so I just thought it would just be something fun and new to try. And I was starting to like it when I sold my car and when I was riding in Australia. And the other big selling point for me was I knew I'd be eating a lot of food, and 2 months, if I was just not doing any exercise, like, I knew even if I told myself I wouldn't be doing runs and jogs on the beach and stuff. So I'm really glad that I had this physical like this constant exercise that also doubled as my transport. So like I think the midpoint of my trip, or maybe 5 weeks in, I was probably in the best shape physically I've ever been in, which is crazy because I was on a holiday eating like heaps of bread and meats and cheese and things like that. So especially going for 2 months, yeah, I definitely did want some sort of exercise. And yeah, that worked out perfectly in that sense as well. So, and am I inspired to do more solo trips? I think so. I can't say I totally would like fell in love with traveling solo. Like I do plan to travel a lot in the next few years, but I can't say every single trip I'll go on I want it just to be me. Like a lot of people I met over there in hostels, like I really enjoyed sharing the experience with them too, and just seeing the sights with them, and just discussing what we were thinking of the place that we were in. And but I have left my bike in Italy, so I will return one day and maybe do the north of Italy or somewhere else in Europe. But I definitely am like 100% happy with how I traveled, and I want to do it again. You know, in terms of solo bike for like 2 months, like just that sort of formula worked, yeah, really well for me. Next question is, how useful was it for me to try and learn Italian before the trip, and how much did it improve during the trip? So before I left, I was getting lessons, and a few different places I inquired about getting lessons at, and they were all like trying to sell me their course, saying, if you're going to Italy, you need to have some sort of conversational fluency, or even just basic knowledge. Like you won't be able to get around for 2 months without knowing Italian. And then other people I've spoken to have just said like, you'll be fine with English. Like a lot of people speak English, and worst case scenario, just use Google Translate. Like you'll find a way. And I have now, at the end of the trip, I definitely agree with the English thing. Like I could have just definitely gotten away with English. Even in some small villages down south, like you can just use Google Translate. And obviously I try to as least as possible. Sometimes I had to. So in terms of it being useful, I wouldn't say it was like a necessity. It was just more, I think, like a fun challenge for me. And like I found like a lot of enjoyment in learning or trying to learn the language and trying to practice it. And so that's the main reason I did it, was just for fun, basically. And like it just brought me joy, just being able to even just say hi and thank you in a different language. But during the trip, I think, so out of the 8 weeks total, I think I peaked in terms of my ability about 5 weeks in. And then the last few weeks, I was speaking English like pretty much all the time, because I was with Anna Paula and she was speaking Italian to everybody. So I kind of just like, she did most of the communicating with the locals. And I really felt my ability drop a lot in those last 3 weeks. And now that I'm back in Australia, I can only predict it would take a lot of work to keep up my ability. So I think I'm going a bit off topic here. What was the question? Yeah, how useful was it? I wouldn't say knowing the language got me out of pickles at all. Like I said, I could just use Google Translate if something was really not clear. But yeah, it was mainly just fun. And I tried to do it as much as possible, like use the language as much as possible. But overall, it was just out of pure enjoyment and a challenge. Next question, this might be my favorite question, is how did my mindset change from the first half of the trip to the second half of the trip? So I think my perception of time changed a lot. And it's funny because as a general statement, the whole trip just seemed to go very quickly, as I said earlier in this video. But at about the halfway point, so about 4 weeks in, or for the first half, I was thinking like, yeah, I know the trip will go pretty quickly, but like I've got 2 months, and to me that just seemed like such a long time. And I really felt like I could just like lounge around in all these places and not worry about like, oh, I've got to hit this city, this city. So for the first half of the trip, I was in a very like relaxed mindset about how much time I have. Like I did not feel pressure at all to keep moving. And then in turn that made the first month go super quickly. So at the halfway point, I kind of had a realization, like a midlife crisis, except a mid-trip crisis. I was like, oh my God, it's halfway through and it just feels like I just got here. And so my mindset changed like within just like a moment of like, okay, I'm gonna hit all the places I want to hit because if those first 4 weeks have gone that quickly, then the next 4 weeks are gonna go, if anything, quicker or seem quicker. So from then on, my mindset was very like, I didn't want to waste any time. And granted, I still did spend time just lounging around, like chatting to people and maybe watching some YouTube videos. You know, I wasn't always just like, go, go, go. But then the last 4 weeks, because I had that mindset, it seemed to go a bit slower. So it's kind of like, it worked in like an inverse way. So whenever I was just not worrying about how much time I have, that's when time seemed to go quicker. But then whenever I was really focusing on like, oh, you know, try and be very time efficient, the trip seemed to slow down a bit more. So I don't know why. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know why that happened, but that's how my mindset changed a lot. And even on a more micro scale, rather than just first half, second half, like within days and weeks, I did fluctuate in my mindset about how much time I have. And yeah, within days and weeks, I would think like, oh, that day went quicker, or this day went longer, just because of my mindset. So yeah, that's the main thing I'd say. The last question, and I probably shouldn't have ended on this question because I really don't have a good answer for it at all. And it is also a really good question. I wish I had a great answer for it. If I could go back in time and tell myself one thing before the trip that would enhance my experience or make it even better, what would it be? And I've been thinking about this for like hours. Well, not hours, but I've thought about it to try and come up with an answer, and I just can't. Like, I really feel like it was the perfect trip, and everything just went so well. I guess maybe now, just coming to me now with my previous answer to the last question, if I had to tell myself maybe just 2 months isn't as long as you think, that might have made the first half of the trip not go as quickly. But other than that, like, I didn't experience any bike issues that I couldn't fix. I'm not very knowledgeable on bike repairs. Like, I can fix a flat tire, and that's about it. So if something else happened to the bike, and if I was in the middle of nowhere, and maybe I wouldn't even have reception to YouTube how to fix a certain thing, my answer to that theoretically would have been to do more research on bike repairs and bike maintenance. And I was actually expecting to have a lot more issues with the bike. Again, like, I feel like I was so lucky. I only had 2 flats and nothing else. But yeah, honestly, I can't really think of a better answer. Yeah. Well, that's it for that little Q&A. Thanks for everybody for the questions. Thanks for following the trip. And I'll keep this YouTube channel for when I travel again next, which will probably be very soon. So feel free to stay subscribed. And yeah, until next time.